Hey, I thought I'd make another video tutorial. This one is recorded with the audio on the headset, so it might not be too great. But it's a bit more of a ranty video, a bit more in-depth for those who just want a more pure, just me talking instead of the robotic like talk through where I follow a script. So I'm just gonna go through the same stuff, but a little bit more in detail, and I'll just throw in a few tips here and there for those who kind of like this style of video. All right, so I'm in VR and I'm gonna start sculpting. The first thing I start off with the other one is to mention like where to start, how to get started with VR and how to get started with sculpting in Kodon in general. And the first thing to get over is like the menu controls, which is super easy. Pointing, there's like a laser when you point at the menu with your main hand, with this one. And to move the menu around, I generally press the grip button here on the side while I'm pointing at the menu. I'm moving it around like this, super easy. My camera is now following this object, so I can move it behind or in front. I generally like to have it over to my right side, so I'm gonna have to make sure that you see it whenever I show something on the menu, because it's not following my vision. As you can see, it's following this mesh. So usually I'll do this to show you what's on the menu. I'll keep it like behind here. It'll be the best thing. It's usually not how I sculpt, but it's the best way to show you in a tutorial, because I have a much wider field of view, and the camera that I'm using to show doesn't have, like, I can see the whole menu and then some, but you can only see half of it when it's on the side. So I'll just have to remember to do this thing when I really want to show something that's on the menu. Yeah, so the first thing was moving it with the grip buttons. That's my favorite. That's the best. I can just point anywhere on the menu and move it around with the grip button. Now there's an alternate method, which is essentially pointing the laser at this border right here. For me, I find it a bit finicky to move it around this way. Sometimes I'll miss and then I'll close the menu, because if you target in an empty space and you press the menu button, you close and open the menu. So I tend to avoid that, because I'll accidentally close it, or I'll accidentally click this bar at the bottom here, which is the undo bar, causing you to undo the work that you've done. So not preferable. Or, you know, you could push on the corner and stuff, but for me, that's just depending on how I sit, that's just a longer way to point. So I like to do the grip button. Highly recommended. Yeah, so I'll just get into it. I recommend people starting off with the sphere. I mean, obviously, if you want to test everything out, go ahead, try it out. But for like a first-time experience, I recommend just trying out with the sphere as a first time, and then maybe going into starting empty volumes and so on. These are a bit more advanced, as they include many objects, and you kind of need to know a bit about scene management before they'll help you out. All right, so I'll get into a sphere, and that generally will take you into the surface menu, which is up right here. And then it's the menu is like laying out. Here's the rooms, which are kind of like your different work rooms or your different work areas. You have your like miniature scene management bar. It's a lot of the same tools that are inside the outliner, which is this like layer looking button on the top here. Here you can save, select, add objects, do a bunch of stuff. Mostly here's like some display options. These open a separate bottom menu, and or color for selecting the mesh color. This one toggles the grid for your scene. And these are your kind of like mesh modifier tools. This one modifies the actual brush, but this is Remesh. It's for recreating the mesh. I'll get to that later. And MultiResolution for stepping up and down in resolution without destroying the mesh. Like if you have a base mesh from another application, a low poly, this is a great way to sculpt, because you'll always remain in that same mesh, like base mesh. And these are just some quick tools for clearing your mask or inverting it. And here's the symmetry controls for controlling the symmetry of your brush. So continuing on, I'm going to select a brush. I'm going to keep that in front again. I'm going to select a brush. I'm going to recommend the Move brush. As it is my favorite brush in Kodon, and it's just super powerful. The more you use it, the more you learn how super powerful it is. I'm going to show some tips here in the video, but mostly I'm going to have a special one just for this brush because it deserves like an entire video. So in general, I'll usually keep my menu off to the side. Some people like to close it to not accidentally interact with it or grab it. Now, I guess I forgot to tell about the scene, moving the scene around. It's a bit easier to see with a grid, so it's not just a sphere. It's using the grip buttons as well. The left-hand grip button will always just move the scene around. And the right hand will also move the scene around, so long as you're not pointing at the menu. And if you grab them both together, you can scale the scene up and down or zoom in and out, however. But technically what you're doing is you're making the object larger in relation to yourself. So you look at my brush here will be very small now, right? Whereas now my brush is a lot larger, like my controller is also very large in comparison. So I'm going to use the Move brush here. It's really good for just pulling out shapes, and you can really get the kind of shapes you want immediately. I'm going to turn off the grid again so it's not super distracting. Like I already, just from 3 moves, essentially, 3 or 4 moves, have a general head shape, right? And that is just the power of that Move tool. Here you can switch to other tools here. I guess I should show you the radial menu while I'm at it. I'm going to switch to the crease tool. Yeah, just pushing the analog stick in the direction that I want. And then, oh, here I did the wrong, so I'm going to undo, and I'm just going to crease that in. And I'm going to move this up, and I'm going to push this jawline or whatever. I'm just going to make like your average skull. Nothing fancy here. This is just to show the tools. Maybe I'm going to make some nicer tutorials where I actually talk about sculpting practices, I guess. But this is for tools and for you who really are patient when watching a video. So yeah, so now I have like a general shape. I'm going to push in for the eyes. There's 2 ways of doing this. One is actually using the crease tool. So I'll generally just crease a line, and then I'll crease a border, and then I'll crease the chin bone here. I'll kind of enhance the jaw a little bit, and then I'll use those lines to sort of readjust my kind of facial proportions a bit. I'll look at the brow ridge. You know, maybe I'll crease in this ridge in the skull here, enhance these lines. And at the start of a sculpture, it's generally nice for me to just overdo it and then kind of tone it back. So the crease brush is really good for just sketching out on the surface the kind of proportions and whatever stuff you want. Also, as you can see, I make the crease brush come out and in, and that is when I'm holding the Alt button. Your brush will do like the opposite. For example, my clay brush by default will just push out. But if I hold Alt, it'll sort of dig in. See that? And the same is for the crease brush. And the clay brush is also, it's very useful for like sketching out your initial shapes. Here I'm just gonna use it to just do like micro detailing. Essentially, you could do all this stuff with the Move brush. But you know, I like to jump around, but sometimes I just actually just use the Move brush. And let's say if I want to have a skull, I'm just going to grab it in here. So what I'm doing here, like this trick, It's kind of like a trick. I'm essentially, instead of holding the brush up front, I'm pushing it through the mesh, and I'm seeing how deep into the mesh I'm actually pushing it, and that helps me control like every part of it. Now, I showed you the move brush. What I did right there was the smooth. So instead of holding Alt, I'm holding the other button, which I believe is X. We should really mark them here on the controller so I can remember their names. And that essentially just smooths. So it's like a quick select for the smooth tool, which is, although a lot of people will say should kind of avoid it because it kind of destroys your form. You know, when you know how to use it, it's the most powerful thing to actually adjust your shapes if you kind of overdid it a bit before. So then you can kind of clean up a little bit with it. And already, with just a few strokes and moves, I already have kind of a skull shape. I'm not trying to speed sculpt here, but you know, it's really a nice thing to see how fast you can actually get something with minimal effort in VR. Yeah, so where am I off to next? That's a good question. I guess I have some notes over here. I should look at them. Yeah, I can get over to, you can see it already here. You can see that the mesh is kind of getting a bit stretched out. I'm running a bit low resolution. I do recommend for new beginners to digital sculpting to stick with low resolutions, but often go really high on my resolution way more quickly than I need to. So if I, for example, come in here to the display tools, I show the wireframe, you can see that these are very stretched out. And I'm going to make an extreme example like I did in the other, the short form tutorial, and just show you the power of the move tool at the same time as like kind of destroying the mesh. So you can just pull out and stretch your mesh in whatever way you want. And you can see over here, if I'm trying to sculpt here now, it's not really a good feeling. Like it gets very choppy, very difficult to use. And so using Remesh, which, let me bring the menu forward again. Using Remesh, like these, you can choose the slider and click the Remesh to get like a very specific resolution. I generally just use these. I rarely have any need for adjusting the slider, but to each their own. Like if you really want a specific resolution, then you kind of have to choose the slider. Now we're gonna redo this section a little bit. We're working on it, re-adding in the polygon estimation, so it'll like estimate exactly how many polygons you want, and it'll so that'll give you a better like idea of what you get. So here it just press 256, and that essentially just gives me 256 polygons per meter. So it's dependent on the size of your mesh. And so you can see it's a lot more dense, first of all, but also, let me turn off the wireframe here. Also, and let me smooth it, it's also now not giving me those super bad jaggies. And I have a lot more control over the mesh. Yeah. Multi-res, it's worth to mention. Let me bring it up again. Multi-resolution is, like I said before, a good way to step up and down. And sometimes it's worth it to stay in lower resolution when you're working. So using this instead of voxel remesh can be a good idea. Depends. It really depends on your situation. It's really like it's more of an advanced tool. If you're really a new beginner, you probably should just stick to voxel mesh and just remesh whenever you need it. And then once you got used to that, you're going to start to learn what multi-resolution does. Now I'm going to show you just an example so that it's very obvious. I'm going to take super low resolution mesh here. Right? I mean, this is super low resolution mesh. Here, let me remesh it again. I'm going to put on the wireframe, so this is all clear. Right? Super low resolution mesh. And when I push, can I get them both in the scene at the same time? Yeah, if I, yeah, like this. I'm gonna have to have it behind, maybe on this side. Yeah, that'll work. Maybe I should scoot over to be in the scene as well. Yeah, if I push much higher res here, you can see immediately it increases the resolution of the mesh. Right? It quadruples the resolution of the mesh. It went from 3,710 to 14,657. And if I press it again, it'll do that again. And I press it again, it'll do that again. And it just gets denser and denser and denser. Now, the benefit of this is that I can go and sort of detail at a very high resolution level, but I'm going to keep it on this side and it seemed to work. But I want to step down again. I can still come down here and do like moves, which are quite a lot easier to control at this level. You sort of get like a caged version, or you can smooth really powerfully. Like if you have a very dense mesh, smooth gets a bit slow. Like really dense mesh. Smooth is fairly fast in Kodon, but it does get slower with higher resolution. And so once I've done this and I go back up in resolution, let me bring this over again, going back up again. It, as you can see, it retained, let me turn off the wireframe again. It retained the detail that I'd sculpted before, but it applied the deformations that I did at this lower resolution. So I get the cheekbones out again. I think I indentated the nose area and anything like that. All right, so I've been over most of that. Symmetry is pretty self-explanatory. By default, in Kodon, you're symmetrical. And yeah, turning it on and off, that's what that does. Same with mask and clear. I mean, it's yeah, if you mask your mesh, which is a brush, sorry, I got a bit distracted. If you mask your mesh and you don't know how to get rid of it, you can alt erase it. Essentially, I guess I should explain what mask does first. Masking essentially freezes your mesh so that you can't interact with this certain area. Like it can be used for a lot of things, generally for protecting an area that you don't want to damage while sculpting. But if you want to remove it and you don't want to erase it, you can click invert. Oh wow, invert is just to invert it, sorry. And then clearing the mask will clear it and get you back to normal. Yeah, if you want to add more meshes, I recommend doing this with the volume room. If I bring this over again, adjusting the slider here to pick like a really good resolution that you want. Like if you, when we get this to the poly count level, this won't be that useful actually, but poly per meter essentially. So if I pick 135, I click new volume, and then I can start sculpting and anywhere in the space. This is essentially what volume does. Or I can select, this is important, left hand trigger to select objects, right? So I'm going to select this one. I'm going to go into volume and I'm going to convert it. So now this is also a volume mesh, and then I can erase parts of it, for example. Another way to add an object is to just press here on the plus sign. You can add one of these objects. I generally only actually add empty volume, since that's like the only way I create new objects generally. And there you go. Now I have a separate object for these horns, and I can sculpt on it a little bit, make it a bit more interesting. All right. And then if I'm not happy with the shape, I can go into surface, convert it back. I mean, this was never a surface. And then I can, you know, adjust the shape from there. Select this one. Oh, this one was a volume, I forgot. I convert it and keep adjusting the shapes. Yeah. Other than that, it's the layout room. Bring it up a bit. Yeah. The layout room is for adjusting meshes and their positioning and the rotation. So this is the move tool, scale, rotate. The free move tool is essentially to move everything independently of itself. I think that's enough. I don't think I'm going to go through much more. This is like a 20-minute video, so that should be more than enough for those people who like to ramble. I will go into more in-depth detailed videos, straight up like just explaining every piece and nook and cranny. This whole section needs a bit of explaining. The homeroom is a bit self-explanatory, I hope. But it's, yeah, you got your start new project, you got your load project area, import for, like if you're looking to import reference images, this is where you got to come in and you press image and then you get your ref images and you click import. You can start the tutorial for here, which is like an interactive tutorial. And there's the settings, which there's a whole bunch. Play with them, see how they do. If something goes wrong, you can delete the configuration file in your Kodon VR folder in the documents section. All right. Thank you for listening to my rambling, for those of you who like that. And I'll see you guys another time. Bye.